Every week on Bullseye, we like to wrap things up with a pop culture recommendation from me, your host. It's called The Outshot. So comic books have come a long way. So far, actually, that maybe it is too cliched for me to actually say that phrase, or for me to say that they're not just for kids anymore. But seriously, comic books, they're not just for kids anymore. In the mid-'80s, that sentiment was actually a lot less cliched. In fact, it was pretty fresh, at least in the mainstream. Fresh enough that comics creators who wrote for grown-ups, especially the ones writing about superheroes, still had to prove that they were serious every time out. A lot of the time, being serious meant piling darkness on top of violence on top of darkness. Nihilism was the name of the game. It showed you were an adult. No batarangs here, nothing fun allowed, just real serious guys standing on the corner of skyscrapers being very serious. Or standing alone at the moon, gazing down at Earth, being philosophical. Or, and this was popular, slaughtering a bunch of dudes with blood flying everywhere, because that is definitely not for kids, okay? They can't handle how edgy it is. And into the middle of all this darkness and edginess and whatever came a character named Concrete. Maybe the gentlest half-man, half-rock hybrid in comic book history. He was created in 1986 by an artist named Paul Chadwick, part of a sort of vanguard of independent-minded superhero authors. In his origin story, Concrete starts out as a regular man, a speechwriter for a senator. He goes on a hiking trip, and he ends up getting captured by aliens. They put his mind into a big, rounded stone body, sort of like a cross between the Thing from the Fantastic Four and the Michelin Man. Anyway, he escapes the aliens. He finds his old boss, the senator. They cut a deal with the government. He'll go by the name Concrete. He'll sever his connections to his former life. He won't mention the aliens in public, and he'll be a sort of mascot for American exceptionalism. Now, listen, I know, as I say this out loud, I realize that it sounds kind of like every other superhero ever, but Concrete is a very different kind of story. Beyond those aliens who created them, and they basically don't come back, there's nothing unusual in Concrete's world. In most superhero book worlds, two costumed laser dudes can lay waste to a city's entire downtown, and that's normal. In Concrete's world, normal is he has to make himself a chair out of cinder blocks so he can sit down, because he's tired. Concrete is a quiet, thoughtful book. It's mostly just about a normal man trying to figure out what to do with himself in these incredibly strange circumstances. How to deal with the physical implications of having a body made out of rocks. How to deal with the loneliness that comes out of that. And Concrete's loneliness isn't Fortress of Solitude, operatic, cape-waving angst. It's like take a quiet walk in the woods loneliness, actual loneliness. Concrete struggles with what we'd all struggle with if we were suddenly transformed into a semi-invulnerable, enormous rock man. Basically, what now? How do I live if I'm like other people, but also abundantly different? At one point, Concrete goes on The Tonight Show and just straight up asks the audience what he should do. He takes letters. Someone writes that he should be a warrior for peaceful resistance, an immovable force in the fight for social justice, which sounds pretty good, but it also sounds like a big burden. Somebody writes desperate for Concrete to fix her abusive spouse. Kind of thinks that's beyond what his powers can do, and he sends her a hotline phone number. Crazies write him crazy stuff. He gets personal appearance offers. As he wrestles with the possibilities and the burdens of his new life, it's maybe the most compelling story about a guy opening mail you'll ever read. Concrete wants to return to being a writer, but he can't hold a pen. He decides to try climbing Mount Everest. He takes a role in a movie. He He joins an environmental extremist group. And he wrestles with the sad reality that he no longer has genitals. I mean, I know that sounds like a goof, but can you imagine? Concrete is a wordy comic book. We hear our hero's internal monologue a lot. It's lyrical. I wouldn't say it's poetic. The prose has a kind of stiff quality. It's a stiff quality that feels right with a hero who's more of a thinker than a doer. A square nerd trapped in a superhero's body. There are a lot of comics about longing for human connection, about social alienation. Comic making can be a lonely art. Paul Chadwick has said that Concrete reflects his own slightly awkward adolescence. But unlike so many comic heroes, Concrete doesn't turn his teenage pain into vengeful violence. He's gentle, contemplative, and he isn't particularly self-pitying either. In one story, he wades into the sea, not for an operatic suicide, but just to watch the fish. Chadwick's been drawing Concrete on and off for 30 years. He's never lost his melancholic touch. His big, stiff, well-meaning hero still packs an emotional punch. It still suggests to us what we'd do if we came to a crossroads, if everything started over. What we do to connect to the world around us. Even when he's just walking along the ocean floor, watching the fish. That's my outshot.